a criminal case is not the place to adjudicate a policy question, right? If you want to say that we believe the national security interest outweighs the individual's privacy interest, okay, go pass a fucking law that says that, and then make it very clear to everybody involved what the law is supposed to be. But if the law that you have passed does not say that, if the guidance that you have given does not say that, the way to adjudicate this is not through a criminal case.
Not a dividend.
It's a tale of two Kwans.
Now, your losses are on someone else's balance sheet.
Generally speaking, airdrops are kind of pointless anyways.
Unnamed trading firms who are very involved.
I like that ETH is the ultimate Ponzi.
DeFi protocols are the antidote to this problem.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every couple of weeks, the four of us get together and give the industry insider's perspective on the crypto topics of the day. So quick intros. First, you got Tom, the DeFi maven and master of memes.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we got Robert, the crypto connoisseur and czar of Superstate.
Bonjour.
And we've got Tarun, the Giga Brain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet.
Yo.
And finally, I'm Haseeb, the head hype man at Dragonfly. So we are early stage investors in crypto, but I want to caveat that nothing we say here is investment advice, legal advice, or even life advice. Please see choppingblocks.xyz for more disclosures. So Ethereum just turned 10 years old. At the same time, it's a kind of weird mood to celebrate because at the same time that Ethereum has just turned 10 years old, we also have a very important court case that's currently going on, which is the case of Roman Storm. So Roman Storm, of course, is the creator of Tornado Cash. And this is a weird episode because we, two of your co-hosts, are very central to the story of what took place in the Tornado Cash case. So before we get into the story, I think Robert and Tarun decided that they were going to go offline and sort of go privacy preserving in the spirit of Tornado Cash. But so I'm going to give a little bit of background on the Tornado Cash case, as well as what happened over the course of the last week. So Tornado Cash was originally founded in 2019 by Roman Storm, Roman Semenov, and Alexei Pertsev. It's a privacy preserving protocol built on Ethereum, uses zero knowledge proofs and all sorts of fancy cryptography magic. It's a non-custodial privacy solution on Ethereum. It was originally funded by an Ethereum grant. Roman Storm himself is a Russian immigrant, but a naturalized American citizen who used to work at Amazon before he built the protocol and brought it to the light of day. So Dragonfly, we were the seed investor into Tornado Cash. Tom and I knew Roman from the very early days. I think you first met him at I think it was ETH Denver, where he originally built the protocol. Is that right? Or
yeah, something like that.
Hackathons. Yeah. So we met him in the very early days. We thought what he was doing was very important. And so we decided to invest in Tornado Cash way long time ago, back in 2020. And we invested, at the time that we invested, FinCEN had very recently given out this guidance about what the rules of the road were around money services businesses and around, sort of MSB, not just money services businesses, but also the Bank Secrecy Act and what the compliance requirements were for projects that were being built within crypto. And the guidance they gave at the time is that if you're building something that's non-custodial, where the builders of the protocol don't have direct control over funds, then you do not have Bank Secrecy Act requirements. You don't have to do KYC, AML. And people thought at the time, this kind of sort of includes things like Zcash, Monero, these very, very well understood privacy protocols that existed from the very early days of crypto. Back when I first got into crypto, these things already existed. And so Tornado Cash was built very much in the spirit of this guidance that was given by FinCEN back in 2019. And we got a legal opinion at the same time analyzing Tornado Cash because we knew that we wanted to make very, very sure that this was on the right side of the law at the time that we invested. Well, fast forward, Tornado Cash in 2022, under the Biden administration, was indicted. They were not indicted first. First, OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is what gives sanctions, sanctioned Tornado Cash. Now, this was unprecedented because we've never seen sanctions come down on a protocol before. But they sanctioned not just the accounts of North Korea, which at the time used Tornado Cash in the Ronin hack, but they also sanctioned the contracts themselves. Now, the contracts for Tornado Cash were immutable. They were not controlled by anybody. They were decentralized, immutable, smart contracts that lived on Ethereum. But OFAC nevertheless sanctioned them. Now, these sanctions were immediately challenged. And this challenge was backed by Coinbase, as well as a bunch of proud privacy advocates such as Coin Center and Preston Van Loon, who's a very famous Ethereum community member. And these sanctions were overturned by the Fifth Circuit in 2024 as being unconstitutional and an overreach of the government to try to sanction a decentralized protocol. Okay, but then later in 2022, soon after the sanctions, Roman Storm himself, who was based in Seattle, he was indicted. He was indicted by the Southern District of New York under charges of conspiracy to engage in money laundering, conspiracy to engage in unlicensed transmission of money, and the violation of sanctions under IEPA. So he's facing a maximum of, I believe, upwards of 30 years in prison for the charges of having basically built this immutable, decentralized privacy protocol that North Korea used. Now, many people in the crypto community have taken up the cause of Roman Storm. He's widely seen now as being this cause celeb around the rights of software engineers and software developers to build protocols that are used freely by individuals who want to protect their own privacy. He's received millions of dollars in donations toward his court case, as well as support from amicus briefs on his behalf in the court case in SDNY, from Coin Center, from the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, from Paradigm, and a number of other groups. So this case is currently winding its way through SDNY. It started a few weeks ago, and it's now nearing its final innings. The trial was basically set to conclude today, but the closing arguments were yesterday. Jury deliberations began today, but the jury did not come to a verdict yet. And because of the storm that's taking place in New York, a very violent storm that's taking place right now, the jury went home early, are not convening tomorrow, and so we're going to hear the verdict on Monday. Okay, so then comes the part where we enter the story. So we, of course, were investors in Tornado Cash. And when Tornado Cash got indicted, soon after, we received a subpoena from the Department of Justice. We came and worked with them and had many discussions with them over the years to help them understand our role in the investment that we made into Tornado Cash. It became very clear that we were not a target in their investigation, and they were trying to understand how Tornado Cash worked, what our role was with it, and we were very happy to comply because at the end of the day, we didn't believe that we did anything illegal, and we believed that fundamentally our investment in Tornado Cash itself was legal. On Friday, last Friday, in the middle of the case, as the prosecution was winding up their arguments, they stated in open court on Friday that they were contemplating bringing charges against Dragonfly and its principals. And when I say charges, I mean criminal charges. Now, two things that were notable about this. One is that this is absolutely against DOJ rules. The DOJ is not allowed to ever comment on a public case against anybody else or about any pending charges in a criminal case with the media present. The rules are that if they want to comment on any other investigations into any other party, they're supposed to clear the court. Obviously, there's a high-profile case, so there was a lot of media in the room. They're supposed to clear the court and have a private colloquy with the judge. They did not do that. They made the statement in open court. And of course, they claimed that they were, so this is one thing whether or not this was even correct, the way that they stated this, but then they claimed that they were contemplating charging Dragonfly, that they were charging Dragonfly basically for investing into a company or into a protocol that may have been accused of wrongdoing, which, to be clear, has no precedent ever in American history. That has never, ever happened. Whether it's, you think of Enron, you think of Theranos, you think of FTX, never, ever has there been any indication that an investor can be charged for the conduct of a potential investment, to say nothing of the validity of the underlying charges. So this on Friday kicked off a firestorm. So immediately we heard about this in the press. We were like, wait, what the fuck? There was media reporting that all of a sudden Dragonfly is going to be charged for the investment in Tornado Cash. Quickly made its way around the world. We went on Twitter. We responded. We said, this is absolutely outrageous. This is totally not correct. The DOJ has never told us this. And we made very clear that if the DOJ were to bring charges, that they would be meritless and that we were planning to defend ourselves. Like I said, kicked off a firestorm. Everybody we know was talking about this. Then by Monday, presumably after this made its way around the world, the DOJ went and read into open court first thing in the morning that the media reports that they were planning to charge people at Dragonfly were incorrect and that they were not planning to bring charges and that we were not targets in their investigation. So for whatever reason, and I'm sure we're going to learn more about this later, they completely backtracked in the story that they gave to the press on Monday morning. But it was a pretty insane weekend for Tom and I and for everybody at Dragonfly trying to understand what the fuck was going on and the notion that we ourselves were going to be criminally targeted. So all of that being said, Roman Storm ultimately is the one who actually is facing these criminal charges. And the jury is in the process of deliberation, and we still don't know which way it's going to land. Many people who I've spoken to believe that it's very likely that even if he does get charged, that he has a very, very strong case on appeal. But of course, that appeal is likely to take years. And at the end of the day, it's going to be even more damage psychologically and monetarily and reputationally to Roman Storm, who, he has a young daughter, if he has to continue fighting this fight that he's already been fighting for the last few years. So I'll stop there. I've been monologuing for a long time, and I'm also exhausted because, I haven't slept very much in the last week, to be honest, just because of how crazy this whole experience has been. And yesterday I was reading the trial transcripts. They come out every night soon after the trial took place, because unfortunately I'm not in New York, so I couldn't be there to actually witness the case. Up until this time, you may have all noticed that we didn't talk very much about the Tornado Cash case. And a big part of the reason why we didn't talk about it is that, when we were subpoenaed by the DOJ, we were asked to keep the subpoena quiet and not to talk about the investigation by the DOJ. And we were also advised by our counsel not to say anything, not to comment publicly on the case, and not to put anything out there, just because of the riskiness of the entire situation. But now the DOJ has dredged all this up and, sort of made it a public affair. Now here we are. So I'm going to stop there. Tom, obviously you are also very much at the center of this story. I'll just open the floor to you.
First off, thank you everyone for all the support. Thank you all my Free Tom fans and everyone who walked out of school on Friday to support me. I mean, I think you recapped a lot of it. So much of it, this has been frustrating. Obviously, I think the merits of the case are absurd. Like, just when you look at the actual fact pattern, it just doesn't make any sense why Roman would have liability in my mind, or I hope the jury could find him, but that's kind of beside the point. And it's one of those things where there's just the power of the government is so lopsided and asymmetric. And even as you sort of mentioned, there's this, sort of idea that, well, truth will, find its way to the light. And, ideally, if you're, innocent, that will sort of be shown in court. But that the process of getting there is so treacherous and long and expensive, and just the very act of like pointing the big gun of the government at someone is enough to be extremely damaging. And so it's frustrating to feel like the government is not acting in good faith. There's weird personal hangups probably where, hey, this has been a big case and they've spent a bunch of time and their own personal reputation into it. And it seems like that's kind of what's driving it. And so it's just really kind of very blackpilling to think that, like, ultimately you have this view that maybe you're taught in school of, here's how checks and balances work in different branches of the government, and here's how it's supposed to operate. But ultimately, these are people, and people are very flawed, and you sort of see those come through in the way that they act. So it's just been frustrating to be watching this thing unfold.
So there was a famous memo that went out, the Todd Blanche memo, I'll call the Blanche memo, which I think it was just a few months ago after the Trump administration came in, that the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, wrote a memo to all of the DOJ basically saying that, like, hey, we are no longer going to be prosecuting these sort of victimless crimes within crypto of, non-registration or non-compliance type crimes. Like, these should not be criminal. We should not be using DOJ resources to go after these. We should go after people who are, the real bad guys, quote unquote, right? So like the sort of the cartels and, these groups that are actively hacking people or actively, engaging in harm. And the core of the question behind Tornado Cash was this question of, did they have an obligation, an affirmative obligation to engage in AML KYC on the Tornado Cash platform, right? And that was the essence of what the government argued in their closing arguments, is that they brought some witness on the stand, and that witness stated that Tornado Cash could have had a central registry of all of their users. They could have had a login, like a username password system, and they could have had a central registry where they were checking, is this a good guy or a bad guy that's using this stuff? And if so, are we going to de-anonymize them and report them to the government and, like, issue suspicious activity reports, presumably. What the government described, which I think was really rebutted by Matthew Green, who was one of the expert witnesses for the defense, but what the government described is not a privacy protocol. What the government described is the same as any other bit. What the government described is like Coinbase. Right? They were saying, like, why isn't Tornado Cash Coinbase? And the answer is that's not why Tornado Cash was created. It was not meant to be Coinbase. If it is legal for you to use WhatsApp or for you to use Signal or for you to use one of these things such that, we talk so much about how Apple is so respectful of privacy. Well, the sense in which Apple is respectful for privacy is that Apple itself cannot open your phone. Apple itself cannot go retrieve your iMessage messages and tell the FBI or the government what you said and when you said it. That, right, we obviously understand why someone would care about that and why it unlike the way the government is framing this case, we obviously understand why it's not just criminals who would care about the right to have that sort of privacy. And so what frustrates me so much about this case, and I completely agree with you, is that there's such an asymmetry of power between the government and the individual. And that's always true. And it's a big part of the reason why our counsel was very, very clear to us. Do not fucking say anything. Do not say anything about this case until you are very, very clear that you know all the facts. And they also said, look, until you are absolutely certain that the government is satisfied that they have the case that they want, you do not want to convince them that you're an enemy. And we said, okay, I see the wisdom of that, because you can see how just even the accusation that you are doing something wrong, even if you believe that you have the law on your side, it's so lopsided against you. And so it's been really painful to watch this whole process unfold, because we've both learned so much about how this works over the last several years of having seen Roman, who, when we were just building Dragonfly in the very early days, in our first fund, back in 2019, 2020, one of the very first teams that we supported and that we helped to build what was ultimately, originally just a little idea at a hackathon into what at one point was one of the biggest privacy protocols in Ethereum. And the claim that he made that, look, I don't control this thing. It's an immutable protocol that we set out into the world and that has a life of its own. If the government did not believe him, which you can see in their closing arguments, they made very clear, we don't believe Roman. We think that it was a farce, that he wasn't in control of this thing. If you didn't believe him then, knowing that Tornado Cash still exists and still works and has not stopped operating since Roman was indicted by the DOJ and obviously has stopped working on it, when the sanctions were dropped, and even after the sanctions were imposed, and even after the sanctions were dropped, Tornado Cash continued operating all the same. Which, if there was ever any proof that this thing is basically just open source code, that would be it, in my mind. So I'm sure that we're going to have more to say when the verdict actually does drop. And I think this case very clearly is going to have massive implications for privacy, for the rights of developers, and for what ultimately is going to happen in whether entrepreneurs are still going to feel the courage to be able to build privacy preserving protocols, and whether as Americans we're going to have the right to have privacy on chain, to have financial privacy, not intermediated by centralized parties. That all, I think, is really going to come down to what happens in this case. So I'll stop there. Tarun and Robert, if you guys want to come back, de-anonymize yourselves.
De-anonymized. Well, first off, I mean, the entire crypto industry is behind Dragonfly. It's behind Roman. This, really is a test of the principles of crypto. Just to go back to your sort of ending thoughts on this, it seems incredible to me that the government wouldn't and couldn't understand how fundamentally a smart contract can operate autonomously. When you talk about Apple as an example, they genuinely can't access your messages or the content of your phone, right? Does the government believe them? Maybe because they have a bigger brand and a bigger market cap. Bitcoin is genuinely a great example of a decentralized protocol that's tamper-proof, that's controlless. Does the government believe that Bitcoin is autonomous at this point? I don't know, maybe because it's grown to such a scale. But there's very objectively factual systems that are operating autonomously at this point. And the best parts of DeFi are the ability to create something that is autonomous, that runs despite or in spite of or regardless of the people that originally built it. We've seen it done successfully many times. We've seen it done correctly many times. And to me, that's just the part that's flabbergasting is, as someone who builds in the space, I know that a smart contract can operate autonomously. I know that a blockchain can operate autonomously. I know that even a centralized thing can operate in a way that preserves privacy. And so I think it just shows a lack of understanding of what's actually getting built. And as someone who's a builder, it's frustrating to see that lack of understanding translate into criminal charges before they get their facts straight.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can add, really, obviously echo a lot of the sentiments pretty strongly, is that it also is kind of crazy to go after an application that I think was like, at the time, probably one of the most innovative usages of a new technology that someone used on chain. This wasn't just like I copy pasta an existing smart contract, or hey, I took something that exists in traditional finance or somewhere else. You actually took advantage of a lot of on-chain properties that are knowledge proofs, a lot of like stuff where this was sort of in a lot of ways like the first of its kind product to exist. And like the idea that you want to stifle innovation in these fields by this type of regulatory action, to me, is just like unconscionable in some ways. It just feels like it's like the bad actor is North Korea. The bad actor is not the innovation. The innovation also preserved privacy, I'm sure, for tons of people who needed the financial privacy in ways that you might not predict. And maybe it's, people in war-torn regions, people who have kind of no access to other capital. And I think the idea that you kind of destroy innovation while also kind of stepping on a tool for sovereignty is sort of unconscionable in some ways.
Our country was founded on the Federalist Papers, which were the original justification for the Constitution. And the Federalist Papers were written pseudonymously, right? The notion that individuals sometimes need the ability to operate privately for the greater good of society, that's long been well understood in American tradition. And like the one solace that I have, again, kind of in the wake of this 10th anniversary of Ethereum, is that one of the things that I learned very recently is that the beacon chain staking contract was actually deployed by an address that was funded by Tornado Cash, which means that now Tornado Cash is basically baked into Ethereum itself. So no matter what happens in this case, and obviously we are all hoping that Roman prevails, Tornado Cash itself is going to live on. And of course, it can't not live on because of the fact that the contracts themselves are immutable.
Yeah, but to your point, I mean, it is baked into the fabric of Ethereum, right? And it is a tool. At the end of the day, I mean, I know I'm repeating things that most people probably already know and have probably already heard or probably thought about, at some point. But at the end of the day, it's a tool, and tools can be used by good people, and tools can be used by bad people, right? It's clearly used by good people, right? Like it has been used by people who are creating the beacon chain of Ethereum. It has also objectively been used by bad people. Lazarus has used Tornado Cash, but guns and cars and fertilizer and all these things have been used by bad people too, right? All these things are tools. And at the end of the day, there's the question of, are you building this for good people or for bad people? And I think the original intent behind Tornado Cash is to build it for good people, not for bad people, but for good people who genuinely need and want privacy in crypto. I mean, the average user of crypto is frankly terrified that people on the internet are going to find out who they are, how much money they have, and hit them over the head with a wrench to try to take their crypto. Anonymity is incredibly core to the idea of having censorship resistant wealth. And there's a lot of people who are doxxed and like don't care. Like everyone on this show, everyone knows who we are. Everyone knows we have crypto, right? It's a risk we're like forced to take. But the majority of the investors in the space don't want to take that risk. Nobody wants the risk that someone shows up at your house with a wrench, right? That risk sucks. And so the tool of having privacy fits very closely with what's happening on the ground floor of this space. And, as I understand it, Tornado Cash is really the same as anything else that's built for the good people. Knowing that bad people use it, bad people use iPhones, right? And the privacy preserving tech, and they use Signal and all these things. But it's a necessary tool for the majority of people that have crypto wealth that don't want other people to be able to tie it back to them as easily. And maybe at some point we'll find privacy preserving tools that work, and maybe there's the right systems for this. But the system seems broken at the ground floor of the ownership and possession of crypto and the risks that people have to take.
I mean, what's frustrating about this case is that at the end of the day, reasonable people can disagree about what should the rules be around what kind of financial privacy and when and in what size and whatever. But a criminal case is not the place to adjudicate a policy question, right? If you want to say that we believe the national security interest outweighs the individual's privacy interest, okay, go pass a fucking law that says that and then make it very clear to everybody involved what the law is supposed to be. But if the law that you have passed does not say that, if the guidance that you have given does not say that, the way to adjudicate this is not through a criminal case. That's what I think is most outrageous about what's happening in the Trader Cash case.
I mean, it's also telling when like the biggest critics, people who really don't like crypto, like Molly White, are like, "This is crazy." Like I think there's almost there's almost this like, at least in the myopic view I might see, there's almost a universal disagreement with this idea that like the software itself was the problem and that should be prosecuted in perpetuity. And I think that seems to be from software developers, especially those who don't like crypto, also have found this a rallying cause. So
Yeah,
I
feel like we've
think
already
this will only
adjudicated
continue.
this. Like this is literally like the cypherpunk, cases, right, in the 90s or in RSA. Like we've already done this in the past, and I don't even know why we're even having this conversation again. It feels very frustrating to feel like the same old arguments get trotted out, and it's weird also to see. I mean, speaking of privacy, sort of the weird parallel universe obviously going on in the UK right now with the Online Safety Act, and just like it's just very tiring to kind of keep arguing against the same points over and over again.
So at the same time as Turner Cash's case is going on, there was also another criminal trial that ended up reaching a close in the case of Samourai Wallet. So Samourai Wallet was a very large Bitcoin wallet that also used I think it was like some kind of coin join type protocol in order to anonymize transactions that were going through this wallet by default. Now, this was also non-custodial. So, Samurai Wallet themselves were not a party. Whoever was running this, they weren't actively doing anything. They just released the software, and it was non-custodial in nature. But they were charged with running an unlicensed money transmitting business and conspiracy to launder money. They were also in the same district, Southern District of New York, and they ended up. Originally they were pleading not guilty. And then I believe it was just yesterday that they entered into a guilty plea. And basically, it looks like what happened was the DOJ offered them a deal. And seemingly in connection with the Roman Storm trial, perhaps worried that the trial was not going their way or that they were creating all this bad press, of which we may have been some small part of that bad press, that they wanted to not see another trial take place or maybe just take some risk off the table. And so they agreed to a deal that would result in, I believe, 5 years for the money transmission charge and for the other charges to get dropped. And I think a few $100,000 fine as well as remission of funds that they earned in creating this. So I think many people have been very disappointed to see this loss, because I think at the time, Keone, one of the co-founders of Samourai, was very insistent on fighting these charges and very much believed that these were unjust. And what I heard was that the DOJ basically gave him an exploding offer, is that you have 24 hours to take this deal. And if you do not take this deal, there will not be another deal like it that's coming your way. And so I think it was very much tied to the backlash against the Tornado Cash case.
I mean, that would not be surprising at all. I don't know the details of the case, but that is a narrative that I've heard, and it seems extremely logical to try to take or book a win for prosecuting a privacy protocol or privacy system. I don't want to call it protocol because it's a little bit different, and not have to risk Roman winning his case, which jeopardizes the Samurai one. So, I feel for those founders like a lot. I know it was probably an extremely difficult decision that they had to make to change their plea in what they, was probably some horrible prisoner's dilemma-esque situation.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you cannot judge another man for entering into a plea agreement because you do not know what they were facing and you don't know what they were up against. And you may believe that there were obviously many parallels between the Samourai case and the Tornado Cash case. The facts were different, and there may have been other circumstances that I'm not aware of. But the broad contours of the arguments for the defense are very similar. Is that this was just software. We were not running a business. We were not actively involved. We didn't take custody of any funds, and we were following the FinCEN guidance that was laid out in 2019, saying that if it's non-custodial, then this is a kosher method of preserving privacy for users. But the DOJ made very clear that they were very intent on booking this win. Many of the cases that the DOJ previously brought and that the SEC, of course, had previously brought have already been dropped. But these two cases were the really high profile national security implicating cases that still had not been dropped, or if they had been dropped, only one charge out of the many charges had been dropped. So again, I think I do believe at the end of the day, if you listen to what the president has been saying, and also recently what the SEC has just said, which we'll get to shortly, everybody has been singing the same tune, which is that they do not want to see this campaign of intimidation against software engineers and innovators continue in the US. People know that this creates a chilling effect, that it pushes people overseas, that it tells them America is not the place for you if you want to experiment in building these new, innovative, and somewhat subversive technologies. Like privacy and fighting for the rights of the individual over the government is always subversive. To Tom's point, that was what the original cypherpunks fought for when they created Bitcoin. Bitcoin, once upon a time, was considered to be obviously illegal because everything that preceded it was illegal, right? Liberty Reserve was illegal. Many of the eCash, exactly. Xiaomi and eCash was considered to be illegal, and the idea was that the reason why Satoshi Nakamoto invented a blockchain was to fight back against the state's impulse to throw anybody who dared to create non-sovereign money and give people unilateral control over their own money was obviously doing so in concert with criminals or to break the law. It was intrinsically suspect. And it's only with the passage of time that we've realized, maybe that was a good idea that he did that. And in the same way, with whether it's Signal or encryption or all of these things, Adam Back, one of the core devs of Bitcoin, one of his very first acts was this civil disobedience against the restrictions on encryption. Is that literally the equations that dictate RSA encryption were considered to be illegal? Like literally equations that you could write down on a piece of paper were illegal because they were encryptions, and encryption was regulated as a munition. And therefore, you had to get some license from the government in order to encrypt things, which is fucking insane. That was obviously overturned in the courts as being illegal, but it was overturned from people taking a stand individually for what they believed was an unjust encroachment of the government on the rights of individuals. So anyway, sorry, I'm sure people have heard me talking in circles enough now, so we're going to stop here. But we'll have much more to say on this case once we see the verdict come down, presumably early next week. Okay. We were also going to cover the OpenSea case. I don't know if I want to talk about OpenSea.
Not as important.
Next week on the show.
Yeah,
maybe we'll get whatever. Okay. All right. So let's cover a case that we have been circling around but have not gotten to, which is Robert's liquor store. We've been getting a lot of requests for Robert to explain what happened with the liquor store situation. So I'm going to cede the floor to you, Robert. Explain to us what happened in this story. Give us the chronology and how it resolved.
Yeah. So the short of it is, I have observed, a trend of a lot of companies preparing to become digital asset treasury companies. This is widespread at this point. You've probably seen dozens of these things popping up. MicroStrategy has really blazed a trail that everybody else is following at this point. And, as an individual investor, I love to research things, at like 2 a.m. when I'm, hanging out in bed, one of my many hobbies. And so, I was researching companies in the space. And one of the things that sort of came across my research was a company that was a nano market cap company, but which seemed like it wanted to become a digital asset treasury company. They had announced that they were exploring digital assets, and they had signed up and gotten a Coinbase Prime account. And the company seemed well positioned for this. Some people on the internet were like,
Well,
"Oh,
how do you
Wait,
find like where does this?
Also, why is getting a Coinbase Prime account sufficient?
Great question. But I mean, it's one less step for the sort of like a factory assembly line of creating a digital asset treasury company.
I did not know there was other media about this company before you started posting about it. I thought
they must
it was
have
just
had
like
filings,
some random.
right?
Yeah, no, they had press releases and stuff about getting a. Coinbase
So you're
Prime
just reading
account.
press release like that?
Yeah.
You're just like looking at press release. That's how you found this?
Yeah, I had ChatGPT doing research.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
Me.
That was I was like, there's no way you're doing it manually.
Okay.
It was like what
sorry.
companies are between this market cap, if any of them release press releases.
So you set up like hold on, I just want to understand. You set up like a ChatGPT alert. Look at all the filings for companies that are micro caps that are saying anything about Bitcoin, and you're on it.
Exactly. So
wow,
I'm screening the smallest companies that are publicly traded, and in my research, the Liquor House comes up. Right. I look into it. It's not a very successful company. I mean, it's not a successful company. They've struggled. There's some questionable things in its history, but it's publicly traded. It has, as of their most recent filings, $7 million of cash, no debt, and it was traded on the NASDAQ. And they seemed to want to become a digital asset treasury company. And so, I've had so many friends launching these. I've helped friends, as an investor or whatever. There was one that was just announced yesterday, ETHZilla, which I'm, excited about. But I've seen a number of these sort of grow up, and I thought, well, I have friends looking for companies. I did a little bit of research, and I came to the conclusion that it could be a completely alternate path that no one had ever tried. To instead of raising a bunch of money and going in and negotiating with one of these companies, to try to just acquire it outright on the expectation that they would hopefully know who I was, they'd be excited about this. And they would say, oh, crypto people are coming in. Let's form a digital asset treasury company. We've said we're going to do this. Let's go. Right. And so I bought 9.9% of the Liquor House just to like dip my toe in the water, like see what was up. I buy 9.9%. I fill out the SEC filing for this. It's like a 13G filing. Sidebar, I mean, signing up for Edgar is horrible. If the SEC has some time on the side and some extra engineers, like please make the whole Edgar process better. It's like mind-numbingly difficult and horrible. And I actually think more people would be doing filings if it wasn't basically impossible to sign up and basically impossible to make filings. So if you want to see more disclosures and you want to see more people engaging in the process, make Edgar easier. Anyway, I report my 9.9% ownership stake, and people on Twitter notice it. They pick it up. Like, I don't really say anything. And people are like, hey, this crypto guy just bought 9.9% of the Liquor House, and it starts to, appreciate a little bit. And I start getting a lot of like DMs like, hey, are you like doing anything with the Liquor House? And I'm not. I'm like, I bought 9.9%. I just want to like learn more about this, see what's happening. And as I start to see more people talking about this on Twitter, I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, this seems viable, right? And so, on Monday morning, I wake up really early and I buy as much stock as I can buy, right? And I had done research on what their shelf capabilities were. I'd spoken to some lawyers. I had gotten an analysis of this, and this is a part where we'll detour into like the securities laws and the nuances of it. But in essence, there's multiple different types of shelf offerings. But in general, there's this principle that companies that are nano cap, as in below $75 million of actual market cap float, can only issue like a small amount of shelf, regardless of.
Can you explain for the audience what is a shelf offering?
Yeah, a shelf offering, great question, is when a company says we're going to sell equity to the public by literally dumping shares on the exchange. It would be like if a crypto company had its tokens and we're literally just like doing market orders on Uniswap. That's what a shelf is. The only difference is that a broker-dealer does it for them. A broker-dealer clicks the buttons. It's not an employee of the company clicking the sell button. It's somebody else clicking the sell button. But it's basically someone clicking the sell button. And so, I calculate the max dilution and I buy 56%, or what I believe to be 56% of Liquor House. And I do the filing with 13D. And, the number one comment is, hey, are you sure that that's the correct amount of shares? And I say, well, yeah, based on my research, it's the correct amount of shares. Like, I believe I have 56% of Liquor House. And all day, the volume of the trading on that Monday was just like insane. I mean, it's like crazy. And
To be clear, this is when crypto Twitter discovers that Robert is CTOing a public company. And basically this becomes like the most popular trade on crypto outside of crypto is secret DeFi dev is accumulating a public company and who knows what's going to happen.
Who knows
And it
what's gonna
became kind of a meme. Yeah, it basically became a meme on crypto Twitter.
And so basically what happens is I think the company sort of like started just panic selling because they saw like this is like a washed up liquor company that like hasn't really had any traction ever. This market cap was like $2.5 million. I think essentially what happened is they saw this rush of bid come in and they just had their broker just like clicking the sell button as fast as they could click the sell button. And when they're doing this, it's actually creating new shares. It's not like there's a limited number of shares. You can invent shares. You make up new shares all the time. TradFi is crazy. It's crazier than crypto in so many different ways. And so
I don't know about that one.
in many ways, it's crazier than crypto. I mean, like we're talking,
Yeah, I think nano caps, you got a lot of leeway,
Yeah.
especially if you have these like gigantic
So-
cap offerings.
So at this point, no one knows how many shares there are. I don't know. There's zero disclosures about it. In general, when a company does a material, amount of share issuance, they have to do a disclosure and update the public. Like, oh, we did a bunch of shares offerings. Like, this is how many shares we have now. None of that was happening. And so
What's the cadence on which they have to update this?
see, that's a good question too. I mean, if you're a big company, you would do it anytime anything material has occurred, like that anyone would consider material, right? The question is materiality, right? Like if you were a Fortune 500, you'd be doing filings very fast. I think it's different in nano cap land. And so the share count was increasing and, it became apparent that I wasn't going to have the control to be able to call a shareholder meeting or like directly like take this in an activist way. And so, Matt Levine quickly came out with an article saying, hey, look at this thing happening in crypto. And I think he summarized it best, which was you have a known crypto entrepreneur who comes into a $2.5 million liquor company and takes a controlling stake. You would think that the company would like start doing like an end zone touchdown dance, right? And instead, the reaction I think was to panic and issue as many shares as they could to fight off my control. And so I got in touch with the company and I basically said, like, guys, like, you should do a crypto treasury strategy because you could be successful at it. You're set up for it. You have the pieces in place. And B, please make disclosures about how many shares you have because I don't know. Nobody knows. Whatever's being displayed in like your brokerage account, like anywhere, is inaccurate. It's fundamentally impossible for anybody to know how many shares there are. At least with tokens, everyone knows. Everyone knows which wallets they're in. Everyone knows how many are waiting to be sold. Everyone watches them go to exchanges. Fundamentally, nobody had any plausible basis to know with any remote accuracy how many shares existed of this company. And so, a lot happened in those intervening days. 2 days after I started acquiring a stake, they published a lawsuit that they had been sued in Nevada, their home state, by another activist investor who was looking to seize control of the company, which was like the craziest coincidence of all. And like right after they filed this, people on Twitter were like, oh my God, like, is that Leshner? Like, is he like that Machiavellian that he spent like 9 months like putting together like a legal dossier on the company and like all their all these complaints to try to like take receivership of them? Like that wasn't me. And so like the lawsuit comes out, the stock starts dropping and, they finally tell me how many shares there are and they put it into a press
Did you
release.
tell them who filed the lawsuit?
I didn't know who filed the lawsuit.
No, but isn't this the what's his name?
Yeah. So, and again, like I'm not sure, how involved certain people are and how it works, but basically and this is what the internet latched onto, the team that filed the lawsuit is related to the arms dealer from the movie War Dogs that went to jail for defrauding the US government. And so I think he's like an advisor. It's like, I don't know if it's his venture fund or like
Oh,
his
okay,
family's
that's
venture
exciting.
fund. But like it's like Diveroli Ventures was like the team that wound up suing the liquor house. So crazy twists and turns going on. I finally find out, how many shares there are by them publishing it in a press release, which the company went from 1 million shares to almost 7 million shares over the course of, a couple days. So they basically went through like hyper dilution. At this point, I had zero, plausible path to taking control of the company. It was clear that they didn't want me to have control of the company. And I basically had to announce like, hey guys, like, I don't think this is possible. I still hold my shares, which at one point might have been 56%. They're now 8 point something percent. They could be a lot lower by now. I have no idea. And a lot of lessons have been learned here. Statistically.
What are the lessons?
Okay. Well, one, I think the company made the wrong decision. Many wrong decisions in this. I think Matt Levine got it right where he was like, you would think that they would be like waving this guy in and being like, hell yeah, let's build, a digital asset treasury company. They didn't. I think they got the probabilities on that wrong. I think they messed that up. I think they misplayed the hand tremendously. Two, it's frankly stunning how out of date financial information is in capital markets today, right? The fact that a company could go from 1 million shares to 7 million shares and everyone's like the public at large's expectations of market cap and float could be so wrong is honestly an embarrassment to like capital markets. And the other major lesson I had was just that like a lot of what happens in finance is like made up on the fly, like and along the way, like in a way that like, yeah, there's some of that in crypto as well, but just like the rules of it are not as chiseled into granite as people think they are. And so coming out of this experience, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of successful digital asset treasury companies. I still think and hope, that there's a chance that they build a digital asset treasury company. That would be awesome. They certainly have most of their ownership probably is in the hands of crypto Twitter still. And, it could have been the craziest lore for the start of one of these things. I think they blew it like badly, but
Yeah.
that is the story of the liquor house.
Tarun, you're muted.
Are you sure this wasn't just a like a hype stunt to promote Superstate? And
You did get free press from it. That's true. But
yeah, that's true. That's true.
I would say
it's cost,
I don't think I'd call that free. Yeah, I would not call that free press.
Yeah, no, it's cost me
money well
personally over $1 million. Like I'm down.
Yeah.
more than
Okay.
$1 million.
Okay. So I think not legal or marketing advice, but Robert is telling you if you run a microcap, please get into his inbox because he's waiting.
Hey.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm pretty burned out on
You're ready to run it back, Robert?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be funny if you ran it back and the second time Crypto Tour's like, fuck that guy, we didn't make money off this. And then like it actually turns out to be like micro strategy level investment.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that again. But it was fun to buy what might or should have been the majority of a company on my phone, just clicking buttons. Like
While on the
it is
toilet.
well, I wasn't on the Twitter.
It would have been funnier if you used Robinhood instead of Interactive Brokers, I would say.
Yeah.
It would have been like that was like the last detail that you could have.
Agreed. If I had actually planned this out, with a lot more nuance, I would have gotten Robinhood, loaded it full of money, and bought it using Robinhood. I think someone out there could or should. I think at some point someone's going to make the Leshner takes over Liquor House playbook a success. Most of the first token projects were not successes. It took a little bit of experimentation for it
Robert,
to work.
you're always a trailblazer. You're always a trailblazer.
Yeah, someone's going to nail the landing on this.
I believe it. So, Robert, tell us what solves this problem.
Crypto solves this problem.
Oh wow! Could it be related?
No, but
to your
genuinely
company
it
in
does.
any way?
I mean, like genuinely, like crypto does solve a lot of this. And I didn't do this as some like performance art or like weird marketing stunt. Like I did this because like it's fun to just dive headfirst into the arena genuinely and like do things that no one has actually done before, and I don't think anyone's really done this before. But crypto does solve this, and I'm actually really excited for the ways that Superstate can begin to tokenize securities in a way that no one else will suffer this problem again.
Hey, this is a great segue into talking about the SEC.
It is.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. So today, okay, so today we had a speech that was revealed by Paul Atkins, where they announced,
Project Crypto.
Today, yes, today we had a speech by Paul Atkins where he announced Project Crypto, which is basically their attempt to create an entirely new regime under the SEC about crypto and bringing in more and more of the virtues of digital assets and blockchains to the traditional securities markets. So one element of this is trying to bring more and more assets on chain, such as tokenizing stocks, bonds, equities, and a regulatory framework for crypto asset securities, which is what very much Robert was alluding to, solves the problems around the liquor store. On the other side, he's trying to create a completely different environment for digital assets that are not securities in America. So a few choice quotes from the speech. First, he stated, "Most crypto assets are not securities," which is a complete reversal and negation of what Gary Gensler said in the previous administration, where he said explicitly, most crypto assets are securities. So now we have a very clear statement from the SEC, most crypto assets are not securities. He said, "We will work to bring crypto asset distributions back to America." He wants to create rules around airdrops, ICOs, network rewards, such that they no longer exclude Americans. So trying to bring an end to these IP blocks and these VPN blocks that prevent Americans from participating in most of the digital asset industry. Protecting the right to use a self-custodial digital wallet and also allowing custodial services. Enabling people to build super apps such that you can have single platforms or you have staking, lending, borrowing, all these functions under a very streamlined licensing regime. And lastly, he described potentially an innovation exemption such that projects built by early stage entrepreneurs can go to market without full traditional compliance, without having to worry about every single jot and tittle. So basically understanding this notion of progressive decentralization, not being able to decentralize a project entirely from day one. So what we've seen is an SEC responding to the realities of how the crypto industry actually works. And it makes perfect sense because, of course, Paul Atkins, he himself was an advisor to Reserve Protocol and was, I think he was involved with, I think it was the Digital Chamber, which is a crypto advocacy group. So he very well understands the constraints under which crypto entrepreneurs actually build things. And one of the last statements he made, which I think will bring the show full circle, he stated, "The SEC will protect pure publishers of software code." He wants to make sure developers are treated as code writers and not as intermediaries. But if you are an intermediary, there is also a place for you. And he stated very clearly in his speech that he wants there to be place for one pure non-intermediated software, such as DeFi and AMMs and so on, but also for intermediaries. That if you're building something that is custodial or that does require, that is an exchange that has more admin rights or whatever, there's also a place for that. We want to make sure that those kinds of innovations can also be created in the US. So an extremely bullish speech. One of the best statements of policy I have seen. Now, it's just a statement of policy. We don't have rules. We don't have any clear guidelines quite yet, but it's very clear. This is a completely new statement from the SEC that's in line very much with the statement made yesterday by the White House about their goals on policy in the US. Tarun, what's your response?
Couldn't be more bullish. I don't know. Like, I think like that, doesn't that just like say everything that people have been saying for like 5 years, more than 5 years?
It's everything that should have been said a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. No one even knew about this stuff. But
well, 10 years ago, Ethereum just started. So
exactly. Welcome to the world computer.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of reminds me of Trump's Bitcoin Nashville speech, where just like I kind of visualize it's almost like Guitar Hero, where it's like you just hit all the notes perfectly and you get like 100%. I feel like Nashville was like that. It's like we're gonna use Bitcoin Reserve, we're gonna free Ross. It's like, oh yeah, he like got all the notes, and this feels kind of the same way. It's like, yeah, this is what we've been asking for forever, and you didn't miss anything, and it's awesome. So
no, it really feels like someone wrote a fanfic. And like
that's the problem. I think because I'm in crypto, I'm just too skeptical. I'm like, this is a little too good, way too good to be true. Like, there's going to be something that goes wrong.
Hey, he tweeted it. Came out of SEC.gov.
I know.
It's real, baby.
The paranoia, right, of like all the years of rug pulls. I feel like you build up this spidey sense.
I know, but like America generally gets it right. That's the thing. It's like new assets have come along, new asset classes have come along, new technologies have come along. And like America has only predominantly under the Gensler era gotten it wrong, right? America usually is like, okay, there's new stuff. How do we think about it? How do we wrap it in? And how do we do it correctly? As opposed to like, ew, it's new, like burn it to the ground, right? Like there've been so many new asset classes that like we make tailored rules for. You know, whether it's like asset-backed securities, whether it's like, you know, internet-based trading. Like the SEC has done like so many new things over the years. It has never been like new is bad. All of you are criminals. Like it's always been like, all right, it's new. Like what forms have to change to accommodate this?
Well, to quote Winston Churchill, America generally does the right thing after it tries everything else. So far we've
Exactly.
tried everything else. I think the only thing left to do is to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So
there we go.
It's a good slogan for the thing we started the episode on, as well as the thing we end the episode on.
Yeah.
Here's to getting it right.
Here's to getting it right. Okay. We're going to wrap. We'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody.
Haseeb will sleep more.